You're listening to the Codependent Millennial Podcast with Sophie Shiloh, episode 35, Food Freedom with Maria Macsay. Hello, beauties. So, if you are anything like me, your journey with codependency and healing from it has also involved lots of work on your relationship with food and with your body. Today, I'm sharing an interview with you from Maria Macsay's Food Freedom Show, all about the intersections of codependency healing and food. If you know you'd like to develop a healthier relationship with food, with alcohol, with your body, and with your codependency, this episode was made for you. If you'd like to get access to the rest of the interviews from Maria Macsay's Food Freedom Show, just go to foodfreedomshow.com and sign up. It is completely free, which is crazy to me, and full of incredible interviews. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Food Freedom series. I am so excited to have Sophie here with us today. Sophie is the codependency coach for millennial women. She helps her private and group clients move past people-pleasing, self-neglect, fear, guilt, and shame so that they can start living the amazing lives that they're always dreaming of living. Sophie spent years living her life in reaction to what other people wanted from her, ending up miserable, resentful, and hopeless. And after years of research, therapy, and coaching, and a lot of self-development, she's answered the question, how do I love myself and my life? And she has made that her mission to help others do the same. So she is going to give us a nugget into how she helps her clients transform into the women that they've always been inside, but have been too afraid of stepping into. So welcome, Sophie. I'm super pumped to have you here.
Thank you so much, Maria. This topic is near and dear to my heart, and I think it's so important because it can be one of those things that people suffer with silently. It's very easy to hide your problems with food and your problems with emotions. But it doesn't mean that you're not in, serious danger.
Totally. And we started talking about when we first connected, codependency and food, and how those are actually so interconnected when we have a challenging relationship to food, to look at like, oh, is this codependent behavior? And that's why I'm so excited to have you on here so that you can give us your lens. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey with food and your relationship to it. And I'm sure the audience would love to hear too. And then we can hear more about how you've moved through that and how that now applies to even some of your coaching.
Yeah. Okay. There is so much here for us to dive into. Where would you like me to start? Like the way that I kind of conceptualize this in my mind is there's codependency and there's emotional eating. There's the intersection between the two. And so much of it is misunderstood. So I guess I can just take it from the top, if that's okay with you, talking about the sort of higher level, what is codependency and why are we talking about this in a food summit, right? Why are we?
I love that.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. So codependency, the way that I like to define it is just the chronic abandonment of the self, sometimes in perceived service to others, and sometimes just because of really low self-worth. Sometimes people develop codependent habits just because they are trying to be the peacekeeper in their home, or make up for a family member's trauma or a family member's inability to deal with their own emotional issues, things like this. And sometimes people develop codependent behaviors just because they have extremely low self-worth, and it's not necessarily linked to wanting to overcompensate for a void in the family or in their, immediate circle. So what is common across all codependence, across all cases of codependency, is that we put ourselves last on the list 100% of the time. There is no moment in our lives in which we decide that we have importance. We have decided ahead of time that we do not deserve the care that we want to give to others, the love, the space, the time, the energy, the resources, none of that. Is that making sense?
Totally. And I can see my own codependent tendencies in that have definitely been a journey for me. So yes, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I fully embrace the title of recovering codependent, but some people aren't comfortable with that. And I think that's fine because I see codependent tendencies everywhere I look, especially in like movies and songs and TV shows, in the media, like we see it all over. And I see it in the way that, my friends interact with their parents or whatever. So you can have codependent tendencies that need healing, even if you don't yourself identify as a codependent. I think codependency healing and elements of healing your codependency really does apply to everyone across the board. So the way that this intersects with food specifically is the way that I see it most, and the way that I myself experienced it, is that part of the reason why we develop these maladaptive tendencies in childhood, these caretaking, people pleasing, hiding ourselves, trying to make ourselves small, trying to escape or avoid either confrontation or just big emotions in general, that can continue to show up in your relationship with food. So food can be both, of course, a distraction, a way to numb. We all know this. We're all familiar, just as can be alcohol, shopping, sex, drugs, all of that. Work, for example. Food is just one that is so common, and especially so common in women. So you'll find that in order to dull the experience of, like I said, those maladaptive tendencies in childhood that we developed to escape from whatever painful thing was happening, we're gonna want to gravitate towards food to numb those out, to dull the experience of that, to just make it a little bit less sharp, right? And in childhood, the tendencies or the coping skills that we developed in childhood that were so genius when we were little, because they kept us safe in a way, right? They kept us from a certain degree of emotional harm. If we bring those with us into adulthood, when we actually have the emotional capacity to handle those things that we didn't in childhood, those tendencies, those coping mechanisms become destructive. They no longer protect us. They keep us stuck. They keep us addicted. They keep us small. They keep us hiding. And so our relationship with food is one of the examples of those things, right?
Yeah.
So with codependency, someone will come to me and say, well, I feel like I'm just addicted to this relationship, and I feel like I don't know who I am outside of it. And so we'll start to dive into that. We'll start to dive into, okay, where did you lose yourself, and why at some point did you think it served you to focus so much more on this other person than on yourself and your own wants and needs and priorities? And what I typically find during that work is that they do have some sort of coping mechanism that they've adopted. So a lot of times that's food. You think of, kind of what I'm talking about in this entire conversation is the experience of painful emotions, the experience of negative emotions. And I can't remember which one of my teachers said this. If I remember, I will attribute it to them, and we can include that in the email. But think of your body as a vessel, right? And you can conceptualize your body as like a crystal wine glass, for example. When it's empty and there's a vibration, maybe someone hits it with a fork, right? That sound is so resonant, and it's so loud, so much louder than if the cup were full of water. And when we have strong emotions, which are vibrations in the body, emotions are sensations, vibrational experiences in the body, when we're experiencing something, an emotion that is really painful, that has the potential to be really loud and disruptive and disturbing, the fuller our vessel is, the less resonant that vibration will be. And so our bodies are so wise, so much wiser than we give them credit for. Our addiction to eating, our habits of overeating are not, they do become self-sabotaging eventually, but they're intended as protection. They're intended not as harm, right? Like, and so to recognize that, okay, body, I understand what you're trying to do. I understand that, like, physiologically, you are trying to protect me right now from something that you perceive as a threat. But what I know now as an adult is that an emotion is never a threat, ever. That I can handle absolutely any emotion, that I know how to process it, help it move through me as a vessel. And then I never have to do anything that harms me in order to avoid the emotion, be that eating or any of the other things that I listed previously. So that is, I feel like I just went into a lot of detail there, but that's kind of a high level summarization of the intersections of codependency and emotional eating.
Yeah, it's so stunning. And I'm so, so excited by this conversation and something you just said there at the end, where it's like this response to fill ourselves with something when it's really self-soothing, and it's not, it's not negative inherently. There is like a very wise thing that the body is doing. It's like the impulse to like care for self. And so sometimes, because of our human tendencies, and because of society and a number of other things, like the way that we've grown up, we see self-soothing habits that might be more destructive than helpful. So things like, well, one, going to food is like our primary relationship, almost, I would say, in this life. Like, there's our parents, but then what is the other thing that we do all of the time? What's one of the first things we ever did? It's like we needed nourishment, right? And that many times has been like, if you were crying, it was a sign that you needed to eat. And so there's like intense emotion paired with receiving nourishment. So I think it's so beautiful. Yeah, I think it's so beautiful to just address that, like, this isn't inherently a problem. Like, no one has a problem. It's actually like a really wise mechanism. And then, to your point, when we grow up and when we become adults, we can start to look at like, okay, is this attempt at soothing, an attempt at being with I guess soothing my emotion, is it healthy? Yeah. Is it leading to greater vibration, or is it weighing me down? And then we can start to take discretion and look at like, okay, so maybe overeating, binge eating, this feels like it's not serving me anymore. What are some other ways that I could be with myself when things get really challenging? And it might start with small things, right?
What you just said is everything. Being with yourself. How many things do we do all day, every day in order to avoid being with ourselves? It's honestly crazy to me that you said that, because so many people will come to me and say, like, one of the first things that they tell me when I'm like, okay, well, what can I help you with in our coaching? They're like, I'm terrified of being alone with myself. I can't sleep alone. I do not want to be alone. I work with a group of people. I working from home is petrifying to me. I cannot be alone. Please, what do I do? And so going back to the emotional processing aspect of this, because that's really where it's not a soft skill. If you hear people talking about emotional intelligence as a soft skill, they just don't understand it. They just don't understand really what it is and what it means and what it opens up for you in your life when you are able to process emotion. So the reason why people are so terrified to be with themselves is because when they're with themselves, they are thinking and feeling things that they don't know how to handle, that they have never really been taught how to handle. Because, 2020, we have an infinite number of resources to lean on when we don't want to be with ourselves. There's no reason why anyone should experience even a fraction of a second without stimulation. And so what that translates into is that there's not a single fraction of a second where a person actually is forced to contend with the emotions that are subconsciously running and sometimes ruining their lives, unless they intentionally seek out a meditation retreat, or like go on a fasting journey or do a silent retreat. I don't know, whatever. Or just sit down for 3 minutes. I'm talking like 3 minutes, right? just three
Yeah,
minutes
it's
and
so
process an
powerful.
emotion.
So powerful
So,
to just sit
yeah,
for those 3 minutes. Yeah, totally.
really, really is. And so, what is lost when we fill not only our bodies with all of this excess food, if you're binging, um, or if you're using every emotional disturbance as a reason to immediately reach for food instead of to ask yourself what you need in that moment? Because I promise you, the answer is never food, unless you're hungry, which, by the way, isn't an emotional trigger, it's physiological. There's never an emotional trigger that is solved by food. So, where was I going with this? So, if you are able to, I honestly like can't even think exactly what I was saying, but I'll say something else important. If you can get to the point where you are able to notice the emotional trigger, recognize that it is driving you to want to eat something, you know it's because there's something that you're not doing for yourself. It's because that you are in that moment neglecting yourself in some way. And that is the perfect moment. It's this is the thing. It's the hardest moment, but it's also the perfect moment to actually turn inwards and to
Yes.
resist the sometimes irresistible urge to turn outwards again, to walk away from yourself, to not be with yourself in that moment. But like I said, even though it's the most difficult, it's also the most important moment for you to actually decide to do that. And it is a decision, because it's not gonna, like, this is never gonna feel amazing. It's never gonna feel incredible to just, okay, let me just feel abandonment. Let me just feel terror. Let me feel despair. Let me feel grief. Nobody wants to fucking do that. No one's like,
Yeah, 100%.
but it's, oh, this is what I was going to say. Okay, I'm glad I remembered. When I said that your emotions are running, subconsciously running, and sometimes ruining your life. If you don't want to feel those things, if you choose in that moment, time and time again, to turn away from yourself, to put the focus externally, um, and to really neglect yourself all over again, your emotions are always running your life. Whether you know it or not, they are. So you can actually be conscious of them. You can choose to be conscious of those emotions, or you can choose to turn the light switch off, fill up your body with whatever you're filling it up with, fill up your life with whatever you're filling it up with, and to continue to be driven by the desire to avoid those emotions instead of to just process them and then regain control over your life, whatever that looks like for you. So, to everyone watching, I just want to ask them, and I think this is the most important question. What do you think you are preventing yourself from experiencing, being, doing, having in your life because you're too concerned with avoiding the emotions that are frightening you, or that are causing you pain, or that are even causing pain in anticipation of them? Because here's what I find: when you actually process the emotion, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. The anticipation of it and the lamenting of its existence is so much worse and can last for years, decades even. I see people waste so much time in avoidance of feeling an emotion. And then when we finally go through it and I walk them all the way through it, they're like, oh my God, I can do this. I can do this. So
Yeah,
that's my
that's
rant.
incredible. It's so incredible. And I just love where we are in this conversation, because something that I like in my own journey and my own training and education around this is that it's not about what we eat, it's why we eat, and even how we eat. And so I love that we're just going straight into like the why
Yeah.
behind that. And to your point, like, I reflect back on when I was like really in a spout of such like food was consuming my world, because I was either afraid of what it was going to do to my body when I was struggling with IBS symptoms, or after that, it just became intense orthorexia. And then it was like binge eating in between on healthy foods. And when I look back now, I can see like, wow, I was so afraid and I was so lonely. And I wasn't allowing myself to just feel the fear and the loneliness and the isolation. And as I've allowed myself to be in those spaces later on, it's like, oh, yeah, this kind of sucks, but it's actually not as bad as what I was thinking it was going to be, to your point of anticipation. And that, you know, for me, there was no amount of like, just don't reach for the thing or don't try to control your food. Like that only lasts for like, for some people, maybe a week, for others, 30 minutes. Like for me, not even a day, maybe 2 hours, you know? So this whole aspect of like trying to fix that and control that is just such a superficial little band-aid for doing the work of like, what is underneath this? So, yeah, what would you say? Please,
Okay.
please, please,
I
please.
want you to ask that question, but I do feel like I have to share this because um, I don't think, I mean, yes, we're having these higher level conversations about feeling your feelings and living the life you want and all of that, but to really talk about some of the like darker sides of this struggle, because like you said, orthorexia, yes, I've years I struggled with that. Other eating disorders, like we know what it's like. And you mentioned, you know, loneliness. I think that's a really important one because that one I see tied to food a lot for all kinds of different reasons. I mean, pick anyone off the street. Of course, there's an association with community and food and family and loneliness. Obviously, that's not groundbreaking. But to just give people like, I feel like I just have to share this. So a few years ago, I was in kind of a binge cycle. And it was one of those moments that you like, thank God, because, or the universe or whatever, like spirit source, who knows? But like, I just remember not even being in control of my vocal cords at the time. And I had reached a point where I like finished all the food that I had. And my mouth was empty for a moment and the words just left my mouth. Oh my God, I'm so lonely. And I, right? I would have never, like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, it can so often just be half a second where you don't even have to consciously ask yourself what is going on here. Like, sometimes it will just hit you. And that's a very clear indicator that it's not more food that you need, it's actual addressing of an emotion that you're feeling. And loneliness, again, it's not an emotion to be avoided. In that moment, the solution was not to go find something else to cure my loneliness. It was to stop turning away from myself like I had been this entire time and to actually be with myself, which is the antidote, but it's the thing that people are most avoidant of doing. Can we just decide to be with ourselves? It is a decision. You have to decide because you're not gonna want to do it. I just had to
Yeah.
share. Yeah.
I mean, the minute that you said that, like, wow, I'm lonely. Like, I just got chills from head to toe, truly sitting here. Because I could feel like you tapping back into that resonance of what emerged for you in that moment and like just that deep realization. And food too, from like a very genetic level, you could say, has like been the thing that has brought us together in community through like our ancestry. And like we don't sit down, so many of us, with others in communion to share food, which is such a big part of, I mean, if I started on this, we'd go for another 20 minutes, but it's such a big part in health and digestion and nourishment. And so, that's something to look at too. It's like things have evolved, things have changed. So okay, now that I'm not getting that connection through mealtime, it's almost like we tip to the other side. It's like, now how much food can I get in my body to start to like feel the connection that I'm supposed to feel with food? But now that doesn't work either because I actually just have to sit with my loneliness and not try to fix it. And to your point, it's like, it's not the thing that we want to do at all, but it is also the point where everything starts to change in someone's life. Like literally for myself, everything starts to change. It's like we can sit here and knuckle our way through a bunch of different things that we think are going to be the solution, and really to just be willing to sit with like, I feel lonely, and allow everything to come up without, again, having to fix it. To your point, that is such an opening into a whole new reality and a whole new way of living and experiencing ourselves, and starts to inform a whole different way of showing up, even if it takes some time.
Yeah. Like, what if the solution was actually inside? We spend so much time focusing externally. What if it was actually in you? And this is another thing I'll see. People will say, well, I just need more and more and more, whether it's food or whatever. So with food addiction specifically, and you can honestly apply this to any other kind of addiction. I'm not an addiction counselor, but I know a lot about food addiction. And if you are looking for something outside of you to fulfill a need that you have within that can only be fulfilled by something internal, there's no amount of that external thing that could ever serve that need. So it doesn't matter how much of it you get. That's why when people are like, well, I just need more of this, I need more of that, I need a different kind of food, I need another kind of food, like binging, right? We've been there. There's inherently a problem with that approach, because what you're seeking is not something that you can even source outside of you. If you could, people would be selling it. Like, it's not something that you can find outside of yourself.
Right. And I think you said something like people would be selling it, and they're selling like, do this diet, get on this fad, like buy this book about like how you can now feel good in your body. Right. Like, and I'm not saying that those things aren't valuable, because there are some that I'm just like, I think they're distracting. And then there's others that are helpful along the way, and everything is a part of the journey. And yet I think that we're talking about like at the end of the journey, the ultimate actual truth, and the ultimate wisdom that no one outside of ourselves could ever give us, that we could ever purchase, is that inner clarity and that inner wisdom and that relationship to ourselves, really. So yes, everything informs the path, and to just like, I guess, see those external sources as perhaps guidance and inspiration, but to always bring it back to self, to check in, versus taking it as the way, which I think is something that happens a lot in our culture, is like, now this is the way, now this is the way. And we get really, we ping pong back and forth. And all the while, the person right in the middle of all of that, or experiencing all of that, is the one who has the key to unlocking that door that we're looking for through external attention. So
and yeah, as you do that, powerful. Can I say something else? Mm-hmm. Okay, as you were talking, it came to me that it is, again, I do talk a lot about choice, because that's where all of our power lies, and the choices that we make are always determined by the thoughts we're thinking, and so often we're unconscious of what those even are, or we take thoughts for granted that are not serving us, whatever, this. So one of the decisions that I was forced to make many, many times over, and that I pose to my clients, is this choice. You really do have a choice. Would you rather explore what it might take for you to feel okay being alone with yourself? Would you rather find that sufficiency and that contentment and that happiness? Or would you rather, like you said, get the perfect body, or find the perfect boyfriend, or eat this amazing thing? Like, and I love eating amazing things. I think we should celebrate food 110%. Like, you're an embodiment coach. That is part of embodiment. That's beautiful. But it's this kind of decision, this choice between happiness or the illusion of it. And what happiness really, right? Mm-hmm. What it really is not what it's portrayed to be. And we're sold that bill of goods, which is so unfortunate. Like, it makes a lot of people a lot of money, congratulations. But what you're going to find if you pursue all of those things is that, again, you're trying to fill an internal void with an external material. Whatever that material is, it could be something ephemeral and non-specific, but or intangible. But do you want do you really want happiness? Like, do you really want it if it means that you don't get that thing that you thought you wanted? And for some people, the answer is no. Some people want the thing because they're so attached to that being the thing that makes them happy that they don't even want to open up to the possibility of not having that thing because they think that it would guarantee unhappiness. Is that making sense?
Makes so much sense. And I think that's part of like the you know, it's I was listening to New Earth yesterday by Eckhart
Yes.
Tolle, and you know, just thinking about this ego identification, and you know, there's a part of us, the ego, the personality, that like based on its research, which could be a lot of different things, you know, the way we've grown up or what society depicts or what we just are conditioned to believe, that identification believes that like, oh, this will bring happiness, and because that's like the research the ego has done. And what it doesn't know, right, what it doesn't know is what does it actually feel like and how do I go there? And that's going to have to take like self-trust to be willing to go inward to then arrive there, because we've only seen what it looks like, or we think it's going to be this thing. So if it's not that thing, to your point, then it's like, well, if I don't do that, then I'll be unhappy. But what we don't know is that like maybe we'll actually reach true happiness, not just the anticipation of it, to your point, by going inward and finding that. And just like, you know, I'm someone who really, I do this for myself in my life, and it hasn't always been easy. And I've gone through seasons where I didn't do it, so I know what it feels like to do it. But to see that we really do have a choice, to your point, and that it is a personal responsibility. It's really up to us, and that can be really confronting, and it can be so freeing.
Yeah. Oh my God, the most freeing, because once you release your attachment to what you thought it would take for you to be happy, and once you know that that was never ever going to be the way, then you can actually be open for that conversation. Something I talk about a lot also is like living in the question of that instead of living in the resistance and the suffering that comes from you deciding that this external thing means happiness, and you're just spending all your time focusing on how you don't have it yet. Like, no, what if you just lived in the curiosity of what might happiness look like to me? Maybe it isn't involved in any of these things that I've been so attached to and that have been making me so miserable. Like, what if?
Yeah.
It's very freeing. It's
freeing.
Terrifying. Like you said, you have to be willing to walk out into the waves until your nose, until your eyebrows, until something happens. Like, you have to just take that leap of faith. It's terrifying.
Yeah. But it's so like, that's the way. And I'm so glad we got to touch on this.
That's the way. Yes.
Yeah. You know, like what I love about this conversation too is just like, it's been an abundant conversation with so many different angles and lenses that I think is like so valuable. And I'm so glad that everyone who's watching is getting to just accumulate all these incredible nuggets from you and from this conversation. And yeah, I'd love for you. I mean, we could talk for a long time, I feel like. And I feel like this last part of just talking, like ending with this, like the choice, the responsibility, what happiness truly is, and living in the question, is such a great place to like end for reflection. So I'd love for you to share. I know that you are offering a gift to the audience, so I'd love for you to share what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I mentioned a little bit in the beginning, codependency does have a lot of different aspects to it. And while I see a little bit of it in everyone, I think it's important for people to know where they need to focus most, because there often is an aspect of their lives that if they can focus there, it can lead to a tipping point where everything else in their life falls into place once they've stopped this certain behavior, or once they've changed this limiting belief, something like that. So what I want to offer to everyone is a quiz that I designed to help you identify the exact aspect of codependency that you need most healing around. And then depending on what result you get, I've provided lots of steps forward. And so we've included the link to that in the email. I hope you guys enjoy it. It is packed full of information. And you can also take it multiple times to heal multiple different areas. So that will be very, very helpful for you to use as a resource.
Amazing. I know I'm going to do it. I'm going to take that quiz because when you start to like be inquisitive about yourself and observe yourself, it's like, oh, I have that. I do that. So I'm definitely going to take that quiz too. Thank you for offering that up to us all. Sophie, this was so awesome. I'm so grateful that we could connect and that we could chat, and that you were so willing and open to share your experience and your knowledge and your wisdom. Thank you
always
so much.
I mean, if we didn't go through all of that to shorten the path for others, why did we go through it, right?
Yes, that's really such a big inspiration for the series, is like, I know how long it took me to get there, and it's really my intention is to shorten to shorten that journey for others so that they can like get there and start living the life that that the inner happiness dial knows is true for them.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope that interview was impactful for you in some way. If you would like access to the rest of these interviews, just visit foodfreedomshow.com and sign up for free. If you'd like to learn more about me and the work that I do with my clients, just go to codependentmillennial.com. I'm starting to welcome in a few new private clients for 2021. I'm so excited. I love the new year. I love the energy it brings. It's just my favorite time of year. So if you know you're ready to heal your codependency for good, apply to work with me one-on-one. We'll have a chat to talk about your individual history and your goals, and we'll see if we're a perfect fit to get you the life you've been dreaming of. Again, to fill out that application, all you need to do is visit codependentmillennial.com, click on the Work With Me link in the menu, and any of the buttons on that page will take you to the application. I've linked it here in the description of this episode as well. I hope you have a gorgeous night wherever you are, and I'll talk to you soon. If you liked what you heard in this episode, join me over on Instagram at Codependent Millennial for more tips on how to move beyond codependency and build a life you truly love.